So like everyone's like, I want a deal. I was like, you buying that property in the neighborhood that you like that you're going to live in for the next 10 to 20 years is your deal.
Yeah, you're going to look at it as a real deal.
Yeah, like we've been following up with a lot of people that we've helped buy last year.
Right.
And some of those conversations, I mean, an agent told me, don't ever say that you overpaid for the property. But at that point, a lot of my clients felt that we overpaid. And now looking back a year in front, they're like, man, did I ever get a deal on that? Hey.
Yeah.
But at that point, they didn't think they got a deal, right?
So here we are again with my brother. We're going to talk about all the changes that have happened in the market since our last podcast. I know that we've seen, maybe some buyer fatigue. It's been a phrase that we've been kind of talking about a little bit in the last, Greg. What do you see happening in, say, there's been a little transition maybe that we typically would see in September that we haven't seen? How can you bring some light to that?
I think usually the market's quite a bit hotter in the fall market as people come back from holidays, kids are back to school. We see the market really starting to take off, and similar to June. I think from what we've talked about from just ourselves, from our experiences, and then also talking to other realtors that are in our brokerage and other realtors, we're finding that some of those people that have been looking to buy the right property over the last like 6 months to a year. They've seen prices to where they've got a little bit discouraged from. They're not finding that right property and so forth, or it's selling above what they'd like it to sell for. And I think they're starting to say like, you know what, I'm going to take a back seat. I'm going to wait and see what happens with this market. Unfortunately, where we see it is that the inventory is going down, not up. So if we saw the increase in inventory going to, let's say, 1,200, 14, 15, 1,600, it means that we've got more listings, which means then the buyers will then have more of an even market. But unfortunately, I think our numbers are going the other way, right? So we're seeing that, I think that the last numbers that we pulled off were 874 listings. And I think that, and out of those, only 683 of them were actually available and not conditionally sold, right? So I guess we've seen it slow in some ways just because buyers aren't want to get into the multiple offer scenario as much.
Right.
Sometimes those multiple offer scenarios don't work out properly because I think we're finding that price point for a lot of different brackets to where it's like, unless it's this superior of a property, you're not getting that I guess that the same interest, right? And people are really trying to figure out what they actually can buy in today's market.
For sure. And I also think that we had such an increase to start the year, is that people were, from January to September, is that we're looking at roughly about 7-8% in for the benchmark price in Saskatoon. Now we actually hit those numbers in June to get there. And things have leveled off in the last little bit. Now, property values have not came down, but is that I do think that where people were, if they've been looking for that 6-9 months a year, is that they've seen, that 8% increase, and that's the benchmark. So in certain areas that could be 15, certain areas that could be 5 or 6, right? At the same time, is that for them to see that adjustment and then things start to slow off, is I do find that there's always this period where, there's a little bit of insecurity about what's happening. And then it takes that kind of 2 to 3 months for people to be like, guess what? This market isn't going anywhere. And then from there is that people start to get, more invested and they're kind of seeing it. But I do think that you're right, is that right now, all year we've been buying at tomorrow's prices, and I think today, right at this point in the year, coming into the winter months, is we can buy in today's market value, right? But I don't think that's gonna. I think that's gonna change once we get to spring as well. Is that your thoughts? Or?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I mean, I agree with you in some ways. It just depends. I mean, we wrote on a property on LeMay and it had 11 offers, and it conditionally sold way above list price.
Right.
Did they start quite a bit lower than what I thought? Probably 50 low, but then it went quite a bit higher than that 50. And then the same thing on a property on Simpson. So, I mean, I think it ended up selling $65,000 above list price. So if people are finding that value in it or that location that they can't replace, I think they're still going to pay that premium to tomorrow's prices, but also understanding that not every place has those upgrades or that location to pay tomorrow's prices.
Yeah.
And people only have a certain amount in their budget. And they're saying like, okay, I'm going to be cautious. I'm going to wait till that right property comes up. If that's a right decision or a wrong decision, we'll see. But from what we've talked about with, like, let's say Dr. Keith Willoughby coming on, talking about the economy and so forth, we're seeing that our markets just continue to pick up and get more people migrating to Saskatoon. But personally, if I was just looking at my social media and I wasn't in real estate and I was watching Calgary's housing prices, if I was watching Toronto's Calgary prices, if I was watching Vancouver's Calgary prices, and I thought that we didn't have a microeconomy within Saskatchewan, I would also think we're going to correct. Because, for example, Calgary, for just, I guess, they've went up 36% on their inventory.
Yeah.
So more to market. So which means that that'll create more of an even market to where that buyer has just as much advantage as that seller does, right? Depending on location. So, but we've been in the market so long that nobody realizes that in 2008, when we had a global recession, what happened is that the rest of the market in some places corrected 40 to 60%. And we actually only saw probably a 10 to 15% decrease in our property prices. And we only slowed down for about 2 to 3 months before we started taking off again, because we have so many things going for Saskatchewan. At that time, we didn't have the mining that we have and all these all the growth, right? So, but I mean, because we've been in it and we were able to see that, we understand that it's a microeconomy. But when media and everybody else and large banks, they report on things, they don't suggest that we're going to.
We're not even in their report, really.
Their reports you're very good. Yeah.
You know, like that's I think the misconception is that most people they are looking at social media, they are looking at the news, that kind of stuff, and realistically, we're not even involved in that. You know, like that's Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary. You know, like
even what's happening within the states and so forth, right?
Like it's completely. You know, I don't want to say irrelevant, but at the same time, is that we're in a completely different market, right? So I do agree that I think that has been part of that buyer fatigue and that little bit of cautiousness for people to move in. But, you know, like we were talking about, still properties are going over list when it's a good home and it's move-in ready and all the renovations are done. So we're still seeing that people are finding that value in those properties that, you know, that don't need any work, and the convenience of not having to find your own contractors. Even though you might pick something a little bit differently, it's not an easy task in today's market, and we don't have the tradespeople to do it, right? So then you're paying a premium for it as well. But I think that kind of, when people understand that we're not actually, you know, taken into that consideration as much, right? I think that helps put perspective on it.
I think another thing that when we had a meeting at our brokerage today, a thing that we were talking about is that actually new construction, so in the new neighborhoods and so forth, they're actually not seeing things slow down at all. They're seeing that things are still, I mean, our cost to build aren't going down. And so there's such a disconnect with used prices and new prices that new prices aren't going. A lot of people that are immigrating here or migrating here that like new construction, I mean, there isn't enough of it. And if your friends and family live in that neighborhood, then you want to get in. And I mean, a lot of times people are buying, I guess properties that aren't even finished yet, just waiting for these properties to be done. And so if that's the inventory level that we have on new homes, I mean, right now, it's slowed down a little bit on the used because this is what they think is going to happen. But if that's still happening in new, then it just means that we're going to keep on coming up in price. And I think what we're also seeing more is that disconnect. So I did an open house the other day on one of my properties on Colony, and it was interesting. So 50% of the people coming in that have built a house recently or that have renovated a house were like, there's so much value here. I can't believe it hasn't sold. This is amazing. Like, I mean, like if we would have seen this before we built, we would have bought this. And then everybody that doesn't understand the new construction costs and renovation costs are like, this is way overpriced. This doesn't make any sense. And so these two, like this knowledge it's going to merge, and it's going to become where it's going to be more of an equal between the two, right? Like right now, there's a drastic change. I just had a conversation with another realtor, and to rebuild the house that they were looking at in Stonebridge, 3,080 square feet, we looked at it possibly finding that lot, doing the landscaping, finishing it up and down would probably cost about 2.5 million if you could find the lot. And right now it's listed for 1.6. And still people are kind of like frowning at that price and saying it's way overpriced. And it's like, well, where are you going to find a walkout in established neighborhood backing a park with all these other things that would not, like that landscaping now, then it probably costs you 200,000. Like it probably costs 400,000 now, right? And to find somebody that would do it well, that's the other thing. So there's a major disconnect that's still happening, but unfortunately it'll take 1 or 2 years. So if anybody's able to buy those properties. I mean, for some reason, everybody thinks because their budget's 1.2 and it's went from 900 to 1.2, that's what everything should be priced at. Right. And it's like, and unfortunately, that's not the way it is. And if you want these nice finishings and you want these custom properties, just like our property that we have by Bella Vista Developments on 13th Street, I mean, that lot price is built into that property price. The problem is, since they bought that lot, now to them build that house again, that lot has went up $120,000 because that cost of that house would have went up that much, and you can't find it. So people aren't taking that into consideration when they're looking at these houses. It's like, what's the land worth?
Yeah. Well, they got to be looking at big picture, right? Is it, we all get to these narrow sights on the finishings, and then the shock of the price and that kind of stuff. But when you are looking at big picture and you're looking at a replacement cost or just availability for land and those kind of things, like I was just trying to think about how many streets in Stonebridge actually would accommodate a 3,000 square foot 2-story that's backing a park. Like,
for sure.
There's probably only 3 or 4, really. So, so it does come down, all back to, the supply and demand, right? But what do you think buying in the next couple months is going to be? Like, no one wants to move in winter, but at the same time, which
is then slowed down a little bit, right? Just because of when possession is going to happen. I think there's an opportunity to pick up some properties right now that will be a lot more when it comes to New Year, right? And it might not even be spring; it might even be before then, right? I mean, because your inventory always drops, and if you have to buy in the winter, I mean, what was it last year that we got to? It was like almost like 400 listings or something.
5, I think, or
something ridiculously low. So if you're then looking in that market, then there's nothing to choose from, right? Yeah. And so if you have to buy, then that becomes even harder to buy in Saskatoon. So
well, and also one thing, in that regard, is that if sometimes when you're finding a property, you're competing with less people in the winter, right? That are willing to move. But also is that the other thing is that when you are doing something, maybe you have a possession that's, maybe you have a conditional offer on the 15th, and the next thing you know, you're taking possession in February, then at that point, is it actually, you might be able to actually sell your property in a little bit stronger market, but secure your new property in something that's a little bit slower. It doesn't mean that, you're not going to pay, a good dollar value. Like, truthfully, there's no deals out there unless you want, well, really, there's no deals unless you want to actually do all the work yourself and buy something that needs absolutely everything.
But at the same time, then you've got people that are competing with you because there's people that flip properties.
For sure.
And so they're going to make money on it. So then they stay away to be able to pay for it too. So like everyone's like, I want a deal. I was like, you buying that property in the neighborhood that you like, that you're going to live in for the next 10 to 20 years is your deal.
Yeah, you're going to look at it as a real deal.
Like we've been following up with a lot of people that we've helped buy last year. Right. And some of those conversations, I mean, an agent told me, don't ever say that you overpaid for the property. But at that point, a lot of my clients felt that we overpaid. And now looking back a year in front, they're like, man, did I ever get a deal on that? Hey. Yeah. But at that point, they didn't think they got a deal, right? Yeah. But then the market, because of what's happening with our economy, and because we think we're 10 years of what happened within, like, where Calgary is, we're just starting to see that these mines, new uranium mines and so forth, are now going through approval. And once they start coming into place, how many jobs in Saskatchewan have to be able to support all those new mines? And those are massive mines, right? So,
well, and Saskatoon's the gateway to the north when it comes down to that, right? So that's going to reflect a lot on our our local market.
I think so too. And what a lot of people aren't taking consideration is that our people, our parents, our older generation, I mean, they're not getting younger. They're going to keep on moving out of those. That is very true. None of us. I get more gray hair every time we shoot this podcast, I think. But they're wanting to move, but they're not yet ready. At the same time, like when they all decide to move, what does that what happens to our market at that point, right? What happens to our condos? What happens to our bungalow townhouses? Because there's lots of people that are saying, well, we're not ready yet. And I was like, if we've got 15 of those people that we're just dealing with, and there's almost 800 realtors, what does that look like, right?
Well, and that's where, like we were saying, is that we're not looking at just what's happening in today's market, is we're looking at big picture items with our clients, and we're talking about, what's your plan, what's your life plans for the next 5 years, and those kind of things. So I know I got brought into those conversations a lot where it's like, hey, we're looking at what our next option is, but there's no rush. And it's like, well, maybe there is a little bit of a rush that you're not considering at this point. So I think that is our job, is to be able to educate clients, to tell them of where we see things as we're on the ground and hearing things firsthand, right? So I think that's a good way that we can help our clients and to be able to brace for the future.
This is the first time I think in my career we've had so many people. Because I think and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think these are the numbers. It's like 60% of the people now buying and selling is that generation that's right sizing, that's moving out of those bigger houses into something else. And I've never had it to where my listings for the spring, those people are already talking about and getting their houses ready, right? And I think if we've already got, let's say, I think, give or take maybe about 15 personally, that's like, once that right property comes up, I'm going to be ready, but they're waiting for the spring, and they're getting their houses and they're touching them up and decluttering. I've never had that before. I mean, you've got a couple people that are like, hey, I'll sell in the spring, but not to where you're like, this is the timeline, this is the game plan, right? And so it's just going to be interesting. And if that's the factor, those people need to buy something. So, and they're competing with everybody that's moving from rural Saskatchewan here as well too, right? So. Another thing that's interesting right now is that some of these properties in downtown Saskatoon with river views, these condos, a lot of them are sitting around just because people are hemming and hawing on them. I think that we're just building rentals, like a lot of the builders just building rentals. They're not building new homes, and there's not any that are coming downtown. So if that's the thing that you want to focus on and get something that's in a downtown location, now's your probably opportunity better than most, because I think that once those properties get eaten up, it's not like they're building more of them for the same price. And if you want a larger square footage, now is the opportunity, because any new building that goes up, like if you look at number 1 River Landing,
I get it. Yeah,
I mean,
you're not getting a 2,000 square foot, like suites, or 1,500.
You're 800 square feet for 600,000.
Yeah, and you're better off a lot of times. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a nice building, right? There's nothing wrong with it. It's modern. There's a lot of great appeal to it. But at the same time, is if you want that space and you want, a second bedroom so your kids can sleep and not have an open door to be able to do it, right? Is that you do need to look at some of those older places and even to update a lot of those compared to what the new construction, what people have paid for, you're still probably in the good standing.
But how many of those people that you're helping out right now are moving out of a large home, and 800 square feet just blows their mind that they could live in it, right? So it's like, so that 1,100, 1,400 square feet, 1,300 square feet, those are going to be very sought after in the future because people can't find them.
For sure, especially when you're talking about river views and underground parking and things like that. That makes a huge difference, right? So
yeah, it does. So I guess that's where our update is on the current market and where we see things going, and that I was wrong about the multiple offer side of it. I thought that would keep on with the presentation of offers. That's really slowed, and I think it's just because it did work when properties were underpriced. But now people are wanting to use those top prices and then price them there to present, and people aren't willing to pay way over value on.
Well, and also, like we said before, is that we kind of met that benchmark price in kind of like June, July kind of thing, and then things have leveled out. So I think that's also saying that our market's kind of found market value, right? Rather than before we were guessing on how much is it going to go for? You tell me, right? And that's where that presentation of offers came in, and listing things a little bit low. But I agree with you. I think that right now is that we're listing things that's at market value, no presentation, first come, first serve, and hopefully we get 2 people involved at the same time. But at the same time is that we also need to sell them, just because there has been a little bit less demand for people to act immediately.
For sure. Yeah, if people are new to the market and they're buyers, I mean, they're pretty active, and
For sure.
they're jumping on stuff immediately, right? Because they're new to it, they don't know any different, and right now
They're excited too.
they are excited.
Yeah.
I mean, buying a new home is amazing, right?
It is,
I mean, it is exciting. And if you're finding that right property you're going to be in for a long period of time, I mean, you're making big moves in your lives, right? So,
Well, thanks, Greg. That was very enlightening. It's always a pleasure talking to you about the good old real estate. So thanks again for joining. And if you're ever looking for some help in either knowing on how you stand in the market, please reach out to either Greg or I. We'd be happy to guide you through the process.